What is going on, Macro Perspective squad crew? Coach Marcos and Coach Seamus back into his house. We've been taking some time here, but I think we're back on it. And this 2024 season of the show is going to be back to our roots a little bit more. We're still going to get some amazing guests, but I think it's going to be one-on-one time, Marcos. And I think it's really important for us to connect and also at the same time for us to deep dive into things that I think our audience and community would actually support and honestly appreciate. And this one is for the book. So Marcos and I are going to be talking about documentaries, health documentaries, especially ones on Netflix because they are powerhouse. And this conversation spewed from the You Are What You Eat, a twin experiment from Netflix that kind of, I'll be honest with you, kind of hit the nation like a craze, and it's actually affected my daily work. I know it's affected Marcos's work, or at least affected in a sense that our patient base is asking questions, things like that. But Marcos, my man, yeah, anything there from this documentary or how it's affected you a little bit? And I just kind of want to have a chill conversation about this, man.
Yeah. Um, Obviously the impact that it's had with like opening up questions. It happened with Game Changers, obviously
Oh yeah,
same production crew here. Um, and it constantly makes you question about like the resources or how they're diving into studies or how things are being portrayed. It makes you kind of, question it. And I think we're all maybe looking for the silver bullet with nutrition and health and longevity and exercise as a whole. And I think Hormozy said it best, where he's like, "There is no silver bullet. There's just like a million like golden BBs,
BBs, yeah.
um, in order for you to get to a desired outcome that you want." And you know, um, as we tried to record this, like you said in the beginning here, we've been dealing with some struggles of figuring out time to like do shit this year. Um, Started doing a podcast last week, only to not be able to do it because I had to go pick up my son because he was sick at school. Life has been coming at us relatively quick, and we didn't
Yeah.
even get to like truly ride the wave of this getting posted in a timely manner. It's maybe not even in the news cycle anymore, but we're doing it anyway. Damn it!
Well, we're doing it anyway because I think it's important because, like you said, Game Changers was 2016. That was like 8 years ago, or like sometime 2016, 2017. That's like 7, 8 years ago. But then another documentary about plant based is coming out again. And not to say plant based is bad or whatever, but there's always going to be something in the mainstream media about a new documentary on health, and it's going to get people riled up, you know? And I like that. I like the fact that people are finding these avenues in the mainstream to think about their health. I think it's important. I think it's important. However, I think it's important to display the information without bias. And that's the hard thing without a documentary. The whole point is for it to be biased and it's supposed to sway you into action in a certain way. It really just truly is.
Oh, man, it is. And all right, so I needed to fact check you really quick. It's 2018 for Game
Oh, yeah.
Changers. Okay, so we're like 5, 6 years removed. I can't believe it's been that long. One, um, and two, I think the other thing is like that's funny is they're coming out with a sequel. Like, so we'll see how far the science evolves and what they're looking at in terms of like those health outcomes. And again, this is kind of a good point with regards to you are what you eat, because there's been a couple of other studies that have gone on here recently that I haven't dove into. I haven't like gone into too deeply. But there's another study right now that's been showing that like you can actually reduce LDL cholesterol with eating Oreos. So I mean, gives you an
I,
excuse
I
to
watched
binge.
that one. Well, it was, I'll give you the basic rundown of it. And it basically was like over a trial period, they had the medication and then they had the Oreos, but the Oreos already like the LDL compared to it was lower, and it's like it's not that it was directly doing the thing because obviously most people would go like, okay, Oreos, highly processed, highly palatable food, yes, it's lowering the LDL, but that's not the point, right? Like there's other markers that we need to think about as well, and it was such a funny study. It was I was laughing when I was watching the review, and I was like, I mean, it gave me that it gave me the green light to have Oreos in my smoothie.
And as you saw last night on my post, I had Oreos in my Ninja Creamy high protein, macro friendly, non vegan version of a ice cream. But
Look delicious.
I mean, it's so interesting. We become so fixated and fascinated on things that we can include. I think the conversation is like what we should include, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and also you need to look at things about like I think it's the 1 year kind of question. In a year from now, do you see yourself doing these habits to sustain, whatever body outcome that you would like, along
yeah,
with, blood work outcomes? Like objective markers are cool and all, but like as we've been, 5 years now for me in clinical, and then what is it, three for you at this point, almost?
two officially in December of last
Okay, so it
year.
was two for you. I didn't realize I was in year three when we did that first meetup when we were in San Fran. Um, but the I think the crazy thing here is that's one of the big key takeaways that I think maybe people glazed over because they were like, oh, all the health promoting benefits was like rate your satisfaction to the twin that was doing the vegan side, and like basically 95% of them, or I mean however many of them, I think it was like almost all of them except for one or two, because I think it was 18 sets of
Yeah,
twins in the actual data, right?
yeah,
So that they wouldn't continue eating this way, which I
yeah,
again, that doesn't seem like it would have high adoption, and high adoption is really important in my eyes, and something that would be sustainable. Um,
yeah,
and again, like whether it is vegan, paleo, carnivore, whatever it is, the first thing that comes in as I'm doing scans of people is asking that question to kind of get some additional feedback about like the
yeah.
happiness level of the new dietary trend that someone might be doing. Point in
Yeah.
case, I had a DEXA scan last week on Friday where a couple came in along with the father. The father changed his life. He lost 20% of his body weight over the course of a year by going paleo, cutting out refined sugars and grains. And I think he said he didn't cheat too much, but on certain occasions, I think he may have had cake at his grandson's birthday. That's awesome. He went from 250 to 200 pounds of body weight.
Wow.
He didn't do an initial DEXA scan, so we didn't see. That was his first one. That was the father. I think he was 62, which was awesome. I mean, he's gonna be a healthier individual with losing that weight. And his
Yeah,
thing
yeah,
was like high quality foods, which I know is a bullet point that we're trying to get to for number one. And then he's gone now in the last few months with his son and his daughter-in-law, full fledged carnivore. Um,
mm,
and again, that outcome was relaying results for those two individuals, and the percent change that I noticed for body fat loss for the female was about, I think, 3 or 4% in a
okay,
3 month period. Um, she
appropriate.
did also lose muscle because there was no
There you
training.
go.
So again, is that diet healthy and going to retain lean tissue? I mean, no deficit is going to retain it. Absolutely. I think she
Yeah.
lost about, shoot, I want to say she lost a total of 20 or so pounds, but the ratio of fat and muscle only netted a outcome of 4% body fat change. And oh,
Mm,
I thought it would be much different. And I was like, well, I had to explain, lean tissue is expensive tissue. You need to stoke it. And like that's what we're focusing on in this next quarter before we come back for our
yeah,
next scan, is getting
yeah.
resistance training 3 days a week. And I was like, awesome. Awesome, awesome.
Boom.
I think the biggest thing
Beautiful.
there that was also worth noting, again, this is just anecdotal experience, was their visceral fat levels went down pretty substantially. Um,
Awesome.
50% reduction in visceral fat for the male, and the female lost about 3/4 of a pound to a pound. So he lost
Woo.
50%, which was 2 pounds, and she lost about 3/4 of a pound to a pound of visceral fat.
Really good.
And we know that to be like the deadly fat, the ones near the organs. So here was just, again, quick little anecdotal case study. They were pretty hardcore. I mean, were they perfect? I don't think they said they cheated too much. And again, that's how a lot of nutrition studies work, is
Yeah.
kind of taking in information. Um, and for the male, didn't lose as much lean tissue, and there was a bigger body fat percentage lost in that period of time. And I think it netted him about 30 or 35 pounds in a 3 month period. So, I mean, that rate of loss may have been a little bit, quote unquote, on the aggressive side based on, some statistical data of dieting. But he was like, don't have hunger cues. I eat food when I want to. I don't really feel hungry, and I do see myself doing this for the foreseeable future because it's easy to source. I know what I'm getting. My shopping list is easy. They had a
Yeah.
young daughter, And the daughter, now that I think they were breastfeeding, um, I was like, oh, how's your daughter handling it? And they're like, well, whatever it is we're cooking, she's eating. And I was like, damn, like that should be what I do at my house. But if only it was that easy as a parent to just make my kids eat, you know, something that is
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
I I love that. I love that first part there. Before we even go into like what to look for in a Netflix documentary or a documentary, is like just in your diet alone, sustainability. That's a great question. Like before you make any changes, is something you can sustain. If you can sustain this plant-based stuff and you find it great, awesome, and it helps with your markers. And again, we're talking about objective stuff, but also just subjective. Awesome. Great. I'm all for it. I'm Marcos and I are very agnostic when it comes to coaching people. I know I am because I tend to just show evidence, but then I also have to go, what does the person in front of me want? There's nothing I can ever do. I can try to shove meat down someone's throat, and be like, eat these Oreos or eat this, but it always comes down to what the person wants, and you have to work with that person. And I mean, for me, for example, one of the big things and one of the points that we're going to get to is I've had a ton of people come in for DEXA scans, but they understand nutrition in depth. They're very healthy people, actually, very smart people and successful people. They understood the math, they understood everything, but it's an ethics thing for them, or it's a religious thing for them that they don't eat meat. And I'm like, okay, I cannot argue that. I will not try to argue that. Okay, now I know that. Well, how can we get you more protein in your diet that you are working to sustain that is pr- primarily plant based, right?
Mhm.
And it just gives us a whole new set of opportunities to work on instead of trying to explain which is better than the other. Again, back to the silver bullet thing. If we did find a silver bullet, it would look different for everyone. You know what I'm saying? Because it's everyone's bio individuality is so much different. But as we know, there isn't a silver bullet. It's a bunch of different BBs, as Hormozy would say, to constantly optimize for, or not even optimize for, just put in the right place and just kind of keep it there. And everyone's a little bit different, and the ethic part of it is super important. And if they ethically can sustain that, all right, I'm all about it.
Right. Ethics. There's so many choices and things that, but don't, I mean, ultimately don't do something because this is ultimately quote unquote healthier. At the end of the
Yeah,
day, not
yeah,
having overconsumption in a world that is kind of predicated on that is the most important thing. And it's hard. Um, it's funny because like, as we're going down rabbit holes, like it led me into, I mean, I'm like, okay, I'm just constantly consuming information that I'm not applying. I need to switch my genres a little bit. Let me just go try another podcast or two out. Listen to
yeah,
it's just a different take on it, or there's going to be someone that says something a little bit different. And something I found here was, how are you actually like looking at food cues and hunger cues and all those things, and how are you rewiring that network a little bit more so that you can be more sustainable to it? And I think that's kind of like the silver bullet approach. It's like this diet does this, you will not be hungry. Well, we
yeah,
could say like, okay, let's compare and contrast like veganism to a carnivore diet, right? The thing that both of these diets do exceptionally well is high levels of satiety with two different mechanisms. Protein being
yeah.
the most, yeah, like protein and fiber are being the most satiating things that we know of. So, I mean, like again, then there's paleo when you overlap it. Like it's those two,
There
like
you
in a
go.
nutshell. And so I found that interesting, but I think, like this documentary, a key takeaway is like the importance of having healthy foods and access to those healthy foods,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
This is a conversation my mom and I talk about kind of regularly. Like, oh, my kids are misbehaving because they're probably eating all the Takis and all this stuff. I was like, it's funny you mention these foods that your students have access to. They have to actually pay a premium for it. They actually get relatively healthy foods as their free meals because um, every school in Clark County School District has free lunch, free breakfast for every student.
Wow,
Not based on socioeconomics. It is free. Like my son can go to school and eat hot lunch every day if he so
wow.
chose to. Um,
Dang, man, I used to have to get
and
those lunch tickets, man.
right, and so he has access to what is probably at this point in time a pretty balanced, nutrient dense meal. Like they're giving him a piece of fruit. There's probably a protein source. There might be a pizza day or whatever in there, which can be justified as being I mean, maybe a health food at times because it has protein, it has maybe some
Wasn't that
fiber.
as a vegetable back in the day? They're like, because of the tomato sauce. They're like, it's a
They include
vegetable.
that
The
as part of
government
a
said that at
vegetable.
one point.
Yes, they do. And so I asked that, we talked about that yesterday. I was like, that's funny, Mom. I thought they eliminated all the quote unquote unhealthy and junk foods from campuses. When I went into middle school was the first year they instituted you can no longer buy soda as a student, you
Mm,
know, and they replaced it with like honey buns, and by the time I was like a junior or sophomore in high school, so like these foods just kind of started sneaking their way back in there under, I don't know under what guise, but they're there. And of course, like the student at that point is like, well, that's going to satisfy like my craving of something like food wise. And um, I think we have to find a way, and again, and having kids be able to access more healthy foods is make it be more appetizing. Like, the
yeah,
preparation of it needs to be done up a little bit so it's like something that they enjoy a bit more. Um, and again, like a student's needs to like again live a healthy lifestyle can look completely different, but I would have to say that schools are probably doing a fairly decent job of giving access to healthy foods now. It's just
yeah,
actually making the concerted
preparing
choice,
it.
or
Yeah.
yeah, right, like, and
This
really.
this makes me think of like you ever, I don't know if the listeners know this, but like I know I've done it, but like you ever go to your fridge and it's like stock full of things, but you open it and you're like, ah, there's nothing to eat, but it's like stock full of things. It's just because you have to prepare it, right? That's the thing, and I think when it comes to quote unquote junk food and healthy food, junk food is already out the bag, ready to go, right? More often than not. And healthy foods aren't. So it's like, yeah, you're right. I think preparing it for the students and having it in an appetizing look. I mean, that's why I like going to Sprouts, for example, because they'll have those fruit boxes now at Sprouts or Whole Foods, but it's like, it's a piece of fruit. It's got a protein, like two eggs or something like that, like a piece of chicken, and then maybe like a cheese. And it's like, I remember Lunchables. Lunchables is like you got your Oreo, you got your cheese, but it's not real cheese, and it's like now they're like making the healthier version of that. And I think you're right, doing more of that for schools and doing more of that in your home, access to healthy food, but readily available. I mean, it's an undertaking because it's probably more expensive and it's probably super perishable, right? But yeah, I agree, dude.
Yeah.
Nothing to eat,
Yes.
Marcos. Dude, the fucking fridge is full.
Well, and don't get it twisted, everybody listening. Like, there's moments where that happens even to me, and a lot of them, sometimes the meals are no longer, are just assembling a vegetable and a protein source, and I'd be better suited for that. But then it's like, but that doesn't really hit the desired outcome. And then we know
Yeah,
now, Uber Eats or Postmates or whatever, these companies that are worth billions, right? They're like, well, you don't really have to eat what's in your fridge if you don't want to. You can just get it delivered to your door. Um, and so again, like the importance of that access to the healthy food thing, right? Like, I don't know, man. I think we all, I mean, every food can be healthy for you. Like we just joked about the Oreos. They're going to help your cholesterol. But again, like in a year from now, and it's vegan actually, right? Like, like not by design, but it is. Um, and again, like I want a diet that I can, if I so choose to have those things, I'm going to include it. And to me, nothing hits better than like cookies and cream ice cream, you know? So now you gamify it and you buy the piece of equipment that you could literally make it every day if you want to.
yeah,
And I mean, I made a dessert essentially yesterday that was a pint, and it's not like a Halo Top pint, which has, you know, I mean, honestly, probably the same amount of calories. This was like literally three things. It was Fairlife milk. It was a pre-made protein drink mixed together, and it was Oreo cookies. Right, like it was a semblance of three things: 40 grams of carbs, 40 grams of protein, and like 8 grams of fat or whatever it was. Like, cool. And it was such a bolus amount that, like, dude, I eat half of it. I'm like, I'm good. Like, but I mean, like, I'm like, but I've already allotted for this in my day. I'm gonna eat all of it. But like,
yeah. And
that's
when you eat it too, you're not feeling.
guilt.
I mean, sometimes I love ice cream and I'll feel the guilt because it's like it's just purely ice cream. But when it's a protein ice cream, I'm like, I'm getting my 40 grams of protein, like when I finish it.
And I'm like, I like the challenge of like being like, oh, like, I mean, can I clean it up even more, right? Because I know you said like some of that is like kind of the impact of food, or like the ethical production of it, or all those different things. It's like, if you source from the brands that you think are very reputable to create certain things, then I think that's part of it
Yeah,
too.
I want to talk about that. I want to talk about that. Like, I think there's an argument about the environmental impact and the economics that they talk about, right? I think that comes down to like I'm there's an argument here. I don't know the full argument because I'm not an economist. I don't know this, but I was looking at this and they were talking about. There's a few articles on this. I remember after the Game Changers, they were talking about like, oh, for the environment, a plant-based diet is more, it's better. But then someone on YouTube or something, I think it was like a TED Talk or something like that, was like, well, if you look at the economics and the square footage of it, if you were to raise cow, right, and then if you were to raise chicken, and then if you were to make the plant-based meats from like Beyond Patty or Beyond Meat or whatever, it's only 1/10 of the farmland. Like, for example, he made it sound real simple. It's like a cow can last a family a year. He's like 100 chickens can last a family a year, or something like that. He was just making some ratios, but then it's like you need this much land for plant based. And then he goes, if you were to do it with cows and chicken, farms can be ethically created, like free range, grass fed, and they could be more ethical, meaning like, we're not doing these crazy just killings of cows or animals. I mean, they are sentient beings, and the fact that human beings are like so unhumane with them, I guess. Um, and then he was talking about a plant-based diet just to create like the fields for them. They would have to kill so much species in these fields. They'd have to kill these forests. They'd have to kill these areas. So it's like I don't know. I don't know the exactly there, but it was it was kind of like an argument for it, or like a more of a conversation for it. That I'm learning about. Um, what are your thoughts on
Yeah.
that, Marcos?
Um, Regenerative farming is something that if I were to ever get a plot of land and want to try to do something, it would be something to figure out that kind of like self-sustaining ecosystem, which likely means that it's like if I'm trying to grow strawberries, I'm sure that they're going to be eaten by some of the caterpillars or whatever it is. And it actually reminds me of my dad grew some strawberries in our backyard, and we're in Las Vegas, we're in the desert. And he went to go, he's like, oh, look, I got some strawberries. And a day later, he's like, all my strawberries are gone. And it was only a few of them. He's like, what the hell happened? He looked closer and he's like, oh my God, this little devil, this caterpillar completely, again, blended in, camouflaged, didn't even notice it at first, had eaten all of them. And I was like, well, I guess you never got to taste your strawberry, but like you obviously supported another, bug and its life, right? And
Yeah,
we know that with like high scale food production things, that whether it's organic pesticides or whatever it is, that there's things that are going on. I think we're kind of learning that there are some downstream effects of it all. And of course, we'd like to have farms that are like white oak pastures and whatever other regenerative farms that are big name out there, that
yeah,
allow for these food production operations to make a lot more sense. And again, I think a lot of the operations, when they became subsidies of the U.S. agriculture, right, like corn and such, um, they figured out like we can create so many different vehicles for these crops, and things of that nature, that I mean, again, like everything that's kind of in like a cereal section is like a corn related product to some degree, probably
yeah.
a wheat one.
Hmm.
And they started doing that at large scale. So I think there is environmental impacts that are in the food choices there. I know like the amount of water it takes to get like one almond is like crazy.
Insane.
Yeah. So it's like, I mean, are we worried about our water consumption? I mean, we are here in Vegas, and you know, um, ironically, a lot of our water will get siphoned off into like Southern California, where they're growing things at times where the environment doesn't really
Well, California
control.
has the biggest economy for almond farms. I think, if I'm
I think
not
it's Northern
wrong, but
California though, so they're probably getting their water from somewhere else. But
yeah,
SoCal might be like you see some strawberry pastures and some other fruits and things are growing that maybe aren't as
yeah. SoCal
indigenous.
has a lot of strawberry. Yeah,
Yeah,
Oxnard
right.
area.
And again, like there is an environmental impact of the food choice of eating that strawberry, but like we don't really get to see a lot of where it's getting done. Obviously, I see it maybe a little more because they're like, oh, lake meat is basically like dwindling away. And it's like, yeah, like, we our conservation efforts here obviously have an impact of how many people can still live here. Um, and I mean, I have a theory about that too. It's like, I mean, if everybody has a 50-gallon tank of water and we have, let's just say, like 1 million homes here now, like, yeah, that's a lot of gallons of water that are inside of that, like circulating kind of environment for yourself, right? Like
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
ecosystem. And that's why, like with water conservation, with desert scape or zero scape things that use very minimal water here in
Yeah.
Las Vegas, it's kind of an interesting thing to think about because they actually did like turf for a lot of parks recently. And they had to go pull it all out because the effect and impact on how the water would flow and all the things that was going on was actually doing the opposite effect of helping conservation. It was making it worse. They would have been
Mm,
better off as leaving it as grass, ironically enough.
grass or dirt. Yeah.
Yeah. um, so I was like, oh man, that's interesting. And that's just hearing that from people that work for like the state and then talk about like Parks and Rec. And I was like, damn, that's like a really interesting thing. I would have thought that the turf would have been a better solution to that. Um, but it ends up not being. So there's always impacts, there's
Yeah.
always trade-offs and things that like we just can't understand. And I think, you know, like you said, like we're talking about some of the key takeaways that they were trying to purvey from this, documentary. Or I think the first one was obviously like health foods are quote unquote vegan in nature. Um, but I think, like it's more about the importance of like access to what you might deem as healthy, right? I
Yeah.
mean, the environment you live in, the food choices, all those things are impacting you on a daily basis. The food production, again, you don't know where it's coming from. It's another one like that. You're like, they're kind of pandering to these fallacies, I think is the right word here, right? Like you're kind of,
Yeah.
like there's logical fallacies of like, of course this is more natural because you're getting it and it's healthy because it's grown in the ground. And of course it's not having as much of an impact in the environment because we're growing it, and that has like things that can be done to
Yeah.
help.
That's like the argument there is funny because there's like an article that came out on Beyond Beef, which is one of the which I think it's Chris Vaught or I don't know whoever Chris Vaught, whoever is like the person that did this Netflix documentary. He's owner or part of it. I'm forgetting his name right now, but there was like an economic thing about like Beyond Beef or Beyond Meat products that they're made in Canada, somehow shipped to another country to be processed, then sent back to Canada, and then they resend it out to the rest of the world. So you kind of go like,
Huh.
wait, even though technically it comes from the ground and it's more natural, how much like processing does it go through just to get it to your front door, like at your shelf at the store, right? Um, Whereas, okay, can it still be plant based, but can it just be like example would be like farm to table, farm to your store? Like, can it just be like less of an economic impact? Can it be like a local, like local thing? So I don't know how difficult that is.
There's Yeah, it's crazy when you start looking at these mass scale operations. And then, I mean, think about it, you can go to every grocery store that has the same brand associated with it in your, let's just call it like a 15-mile radius. Like you just go to the epicenter of the city, boom, let's look at all the Albertsons. Similar layout, similar stocking of food, and like constantly being reshelled and redone, whether it's with the produce or on the inner aisles. And it's pretty wild to think about. You're like, this is just one store. You know what I mean? You can look at the app and see how many other stores there are here. Um, and you have to think about like, wow, like we've really solved this food production problem in a way that's pretty unique in modern society. And, um, kind of like the backbone of like what we constantly have talked about is helping people with like health, longevity, development of self, whatever. And, it kind of all boils down to like, again, in these isolation studies where they're, controlling their individuals with their diet, and like a ward kind of based study and giving these two separate
Yeah.
diets. Like, again, it was just, I think we like to sensationalize these thoughts and ideas because we think that it's going to lead to, again, everybody like kind of promotes it from like a health benefiting outcome because majority of our population is dealing with comorbidity factors, or maybe
Yeah.
it is like a vanity thing with weight or whatever, versus
Yeah.
again really getting to like some of the root issues. And this has led me into like, again, like I talked about earlier, like I've been listening to a lot of the same stuff, and it's super fascinating, interesting. Of like, by the way, like if you can eke out extra reps and it's not a full length movement, like you can still see good hypertrophy gains. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay, like I'm just diving into the weeds of bullshit now. Let's go like get something else that's
Yeah.
more usable, for myself and other
Yeah.
people. And ironically, like it started with this book, so I'm trying to get back into reading. So Scarcity Brain,
Scarcity
Michael
brain.
Easter.
Yeah.
And this one's interesting because like he's talking about craving mindset, rewiring habits, and he's relating all this stuff to like this scarcity loop and these near misses with stuff like damn,
Yeah.
the thought of these things happening. And like the most recent chapter I read talked about um like kind of an addiction theory, and everything that's in the modern age with humans are
Yeah.
basically, we're constantly doing like mini scale gambling in a way. The same
Pretty
mechanisms that
much.
get you
Yeah.
kind of addicted to like gambling habits with regards to like your phone and video games and anything that's on an e-commerce site when you get to spin a wheel and they get a potential outcome to save on their site. And just talking about
Yeah.
like, these things related to that. But then it actually led me into this other podcast, and this one I think is really worthwhile. So since we're talking about, you know, you are what you eat, well, you are what you
Yeah.
are going to eat, or what you're thinking about eating based off of, I mean, the habit loop that everybody's so clearly defined is cue, behavior, and reward, right? Um,
Yeah.
and so, the other thing I'm diving into was an individual. He wrote the thing called The Hunger Habit. And it's like a brand new book. It literally came out yesterday, so we can maybe use that in the title a little bit too.
Maybe use that next time. Yeah, the hunger habit. I like that. I like that.
And so he's breaking it down from that psychological element as well. And the thing that was really interesting with how he's approached it from a psychology and a psychiatry kind of perspective
Yeah. Yeah.
is a little bit about understanding, like, again, like taking more, it's about it's more so about creating more awareness to what is prompting these decisions, the how, what, where, when, why kind of questions, like how
I,
are you feeling when you're
yeah.
taking this. And um ironically, he stumbled upon things that help people lose weight based on habits from helping people quitting smoking. So those same
Yeah.
mechanisms that help people get rid of
Same
quote unquote
mechanisms.
unhealthy ones helped him then figure out,
That's so funny.
so I'm diving into that, and he has like,
No, that's funny that you talk about that because obviously with some of my work around people with addictions to compulsory things,
mhm,
it's the same conversation that I have with them because they're like, well, Seamus, I had this episode or whatever, right? I'm like, that doesn't sound any different from me going knee deep into my pantry and wanting Oreos. You know what I'm saying? It's almost the same. Obviously, those are more personal and more in depth, but how you untangle that is probably around the same principles, right? Just being there to appropriate and help. And that's so funny that you're talking about this from a different perspective of like the psychological, the philosophical, and the lifestyle, because it's true. Like a lot of these things, quote unquote, in society today, we have never been in the best spot we've ever been in the world. We are in probably the best, if there's a war going on, political things, but technically, technologically, everything, we should be great, right? So why are we still feeling scarce? Well, that's just our human biology, and we
mhm.
constantly need more. And understanding that you're a human freaking being, you're gonna feel hungry, you're gonna feel sad, and you're gonna want things. And understanding that, hey, you can ride the wave of your cravings. Trust me, I want 1,000 Oreos too, but I don't do it. I don't do it, because I understand that there's a short term benefit in terms of how I feel, but a long term effect. And that's the human condition at the end of the day, right, Marcos?
Oh, no doubt. I mean, I've become so much more interested in the psychology of things to help people map out their changes versus just like the X's and O's or the
Nutrition
numbers,
facts,
the
yeah.
nutrition facts of it. Um, and it's
I mean, that's why we became master performance health coaches because it's all about change psychology,
yeah.
behavioral.
And I think too, like, damn, which book was it? Was it in the scare? I think it was in this one. It talked about like solutions to problems, and a lot
Yeah,
of it, like, again is like more of these good things will lead to better results, but it's like learning to do less, which is like a really weird thing. And even if we've had that come up in our coaching calls with other people, I just care less. And it's not that I don't care about the outcome that people are getting, but I'm starting to care less about certain
Be
things
neutral.
and be more neutral. Um, and like this idea of like subtraction, right, is like a really like just like
Love that one.
so the idea of subtraction is a hard thing for the human mind to comprehend a little bit in some regards, because when we look for optimization, there's more, especially in modern eras where you have all these like gamified scores and things that are going on.
Yeah.
Um, but then like sometimes like
How to get
subtracting
more with
something,
less. Yeah.
yeah, how do you get more with less? And it's like, yeah, like there's still maybe some bare ass minimums that like help you feel accomplished in completing the day and feeling really good about it. Um, but yeah, in the scarcity brain, I think he was talking about the solution to the problem that makes the most sense, that is like the most logical approach, might have been subtraction, but in your head it was like it was literally building a Lego. He was talking about his son building a Lego bridge, and he immediately went to go grab another Lego to even it out because
Yeah.
it was uneven. Whereas the son
Yeah.
just removed one of the Legos and moved down the side that was too high.
That's so funny. That Lego story reminds me of another book that talked about a Lego story about who can build a Lego tower faster. Um, Professionals that are like mid mid-age professionals or kindergartners who did it faster, and the kindergartners did it faster. It's not that they were necessarily smarter, Marcos. It's just that they had less of having trying to figure out what the fuck the hierarchy was. Who's the smartest in this group? Oh, we're all mid-level professionals, but who do we listen to? Because they didn't care about that. They just care about the objective. And sometimes the objective means do less. Just get to the objective, right? And
Uh,
um and that's so funny because that's like kids. I think kids are a great area to look at. Like
oh
they're
yeah,
just
like
more tuned to the natural rhythm.
oh my god. So I mean, obviously there's a lot of tangents around this core topic, but basically we're looking at these documentaries to try to
Yeah,
understand things, especially ones that are related to health, to optimize our health or add things to our life, add years, versus maybe subtracting away some of the things that are overly nuanced and approaching things in a level that can make more sense, that you can see yourself doing in a year from now. And
yeah.
while this documentary also may have subtracted or had some omissions of things, I think other people, like I think
Well, the
from
study itself did already omit things from 2022. They weren't fully authentic with their findings. So
well, and again, the blue zones did the same thing. They, had some selection demographic criteria versus other areas. So there's always going to be that to kind of fit the narrative a little bit more. And then, yeah,
yeah,
of course, I was like, oh, did you watch this documentary? I was like, I've never really been a documentary guy, like, because I think it'll sway me. Um, and I can't remember which one did that back when I was in my teens. Maybe in Forks Over Knives.
Forks Over Knives, Supersize Me,
Not su-
Sugar.
not Super Size
Um,
Me. It was the other one that was similar to Forks Over Knives, that like the industrial complex of like modern like meat marketing.
Farming.
I forget which one
It
it was.
wasn't Supersize Me. Is it? It's the chicken one then from
Yeah,
him.
I can't remember the name of it.
I
So
don't
it
know,
was
man.
always like they've been trying to promote this for so long, and it seems so logical. Like, yeah, like eat these things, that are again going to help with these health markers. But I also know too, anecdotally, people aren't living my life, but I've had plenty of vegans come in that their numbers do not look good because they can still overconsume things that again are labeled as such, whether it's keto, vegan,
Yeah,
paleo, whatever. Um, and I
yeah,
think at the end of the day, like the number one takeaway here is like, in order to, you know, get more benefits, whether it's heart health, gut health impacts, the community that you're looking for, and people that
yeah,
kind of fit that narrative, like, um, I would almost tell people like learn to challenge your thinking. It's like, okay, like, um, sure, like I could give that a go. Like,
yeah,
I don't foresee myself doing it because I know how hard it would be to meet the demands of like getting enough protein in without overdoing it on calories. Like I'm not willing to
yeah,
sacrifice how meals might look right now in order for working in, vegan based protein shakes that might be easier to digest and easier on the stomach and pretty much complete from an amino acid profile. But again, like I'm like, oh man, but at the end of the day, like what else am I eating to try to substantiate,
Yeah.
185 to 220 grams of protein in that day? It would be really, really
Yeah.
difficult. There's not a whole lot of other things on my plate. It might get boring, played out. Um, I don't know. Like, and so like,
Yeah. I
again,
would add to that. I would add to that, like, because look, we're not done with this. This is gonna happen again. This is happening every week with people so tapped into, like you said, so tapped into social media and technology. We're gonna have more information now. There's gonna be information that contradicts this data. There's gonna be information tomorrow that contradicts what you're thinking right now. And
hmm
I think the consumer, the people, I would say is, I always tell people, and I think it's always doing less, is being able to go like being neutral, doing less of like all this stuff's coming out. We as performance health coaches see it every day, and we are just like this. Hold up. What do you want to do? What
hmm
do you want to do? And you need to go, hey, as much as all this information is here, it's gonna confuse you. Hey, some of these people have good intentions. Some of these sources have good intentions. Some of them don't. Some of these propaganda places don't, like I've seen some dumb articles, but there's going to be constant evidence to argue this way, to argue that way. I think it comes down to you, the person listening to this, and exactly what Mark says: challenge your thinking. Get to a point where you can filter out for you what's best. Now, that doesn't mean live in a silo. That doesn't mean, hey, let me just listen to the same things that I like and be in an echo chamber. Have things that might disagree with you. Find out the new data, but also don't just get overwhelmed by it to the point where you have to flip the script entirely and be like, what? How do I live my life? Dude, I've been following the same kind of approach in diet and stuff like that, and I just tinker a little bit here and there, and that's it. You don't have to completely edge everything out and then revamp. That's a horrible way to live. But
yeah,
you got to really think for yourself overall. So yeah.
man. All right. One question for you, and then we'll wrap this up.
Yeah.
After all the tinkering, what is the one thing you go back to in terms of like dietary intervention to help you with one? We'll do dieting. Like, what is the best thing you normally do
hmm
for dieting, and what's the number one thing you do to then kind of create like balance and maintenance?
Yeah. I'm gonna answer it from like a mindset approach and stuff like that. I just from a let me answer from a dieting, and then I'll answer from a mindset. I apologize. From a dieting approach, like from all the diets that I've seen and all this, I just go, what is it about this diet that I can find sustainable for me, mostly whole food based and known to be great. I'm omnivorous, and spread out those nutrients throughout the day that works for my schedule and works for me. And again, being sustainable. And then lastly, mindset wise, is if things go out of hand, knowing that this is just a moment in time and I could just go back to what was working the next day. And I think the question that I have there is, for a lot of clients that I've worked a lot more in the weight loss category, right, Marcos? They would tell me, well, Seamus, like, what happens when I have like a treat night or go crazy? I just go, well, what would a normal, healthy person do? And they'll be like, oh, they'll probably just go back to normal tomorrow and eat. And that's just the question I ask myself. If things go crazy, I just go, well, what would a person, like a normal person, just do? Oh yeah, I'll just probably go eat tomorrow. I don't spend the whole weekend doing the thing.
Yeah, and for me, it's like in the phase where I'm restarting it right now. Is like I have to incorporate things that give me high satisfaction, and also then
Yeah.
kind of help me at the end of the day make that conscious decision to be like, I could eat up to this amount, but maybe I'll just hedge it. I'll hedge it a little bit. And again, the week as a whole is what I'm approaching versus like the day to day. So it's like, if I
Yeah.
hedge
Yeah.
today, if I hedge tomorrow, if I hedge these days that are normally easier to um, maybe allow for that other day to happen, but it doesn't necessarily have to, then I'm good. And then when it comes to like the
Yeah.
balance approach, once maybe I've reached that goal and I want to have sustainability, there is a day that I kind of bookend, and historically it's been Thursday and Sunday days where
Yeah.
there's the dinner meal where it's like Thursday's pizza, Sunday is kind of a whatever, right? And again, like
It's
if I
Wednesday and
start,
Saturday for me.
yeah,
So dichotomous. It's
oh
fun.
yeah, it is, not the 2 days in a row because we know that's not supposed to like happen because that can just kind of derail you a little bit more. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, like those, when I get to that point, I know that like I'm in a good spot, but then it's like I can't allow that to get to excess, which can then happen kind of quickly. So, um,
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, well, I have to like really sit down and like ask myself that question, which this book is making me question. Why am I choosing to eat right now? Is it boredom? Is it because I really need this in there? Am I trying to hit macros because that's worked for me in the
Yeah.
past? Right. Um, and again, it's funny how like I look at these things now, like, there's so much out there if you want to just spend more time listening to not just this podcast, but other ones that talk
Yeah.
about these exact principles that, again, you can pick and choose the thing that fits your ethical concerns and things that are your
Yeah.
preference. Um, but at the end of the day, like learn how you're feeling with it and take stock of that, and pay
Yeah.
attention to your KPIs, your key performance
There
indicators.
it is. At the end of the day, we're doing exactly what we do with our clients to you, the audience. We are putting the power back in your hands. No documentary, no podcast, no book is the expert on your life. You've got to make that decision yourself.
You are. Yeah, you want to see 10% change, you gotta realize, all right, it took me basically 10-12 weeks to get where I'm at right now. Probably take me another 10-12 weeks to get back where I was, And again, like ask
There you
yourself
go.
that question, how long you've been doing the behavior, and expect it to take equally as long as the unhealthy behaviors may have, started to set in. So yeah, man. I mean, yeah, it's been a while. I'm glad we got to do this today, keeping it a little bit shorter. Um, Obviously, if you guys want to follow us on social media at, what is it, or these days, at the Macro Perspective,
The
is that
macro
our
pod. The macro
at,
pod. Yeah.
yeah, at the Macro Pod for Instagram. If you want to follow us directly, it's at Marcos Luke Rivera and at Seamus Matthew Sullivan on IG. That's primarily where we are at. This is obviously posted on Spotify and our YouTube channel, and we're just trying to get things back into rhythm. So yeah, thank you all for listening to this one, and until next time, Macro Perspective is out.